All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, creatives from around the world. We are here at the Maxon booth, live 3D motion show. Hello, Internet. We are here in the early late afternoon. I don't know where you are, so who knows what time it is where you are. Could be late, it could be early. One thing is, you're tuned in to the right place at the right time. I am accompanied to my left by post-production master consultant here, Anthony Bari, and a filmmaker. And he's going to be sharing all of his amazing technique, not all, we'd be here for weeks if he was sharing all of his knowledge. He's going to be sharing some of what he does and how he does it using our tools, bringing to life some of the most amazing footage that I saw just even as you were warming up. So take a big round of applause, take a moment,
right.
Big breath, big round of applause for Anthony Bari, everyone.
All right. Can you hear me? All right, great. So I just want to first take a moment to say that this is probably the first live action video session. I'm not showcasing 3D. Remember Red Giant? Red Giant's a Maxon product. And we're going to be talking about color, and we're going to be talking about effects, and we're going to show some video, we're going to show some cameras and some behind the scenes. So I'm going to be talking through a few of these things, tell a little bit of a story, and showcase some of the work that we put together in a very short time. So with that said, again, my name is Anthony. I go by Tony usually. Let's just go down the list here. Cameras, lenses, and settings. Settings being very important. You can have the best camera in the world, but if you don't dial it in correctly, you're going to end up with really terrible footage. And RAW does not save you. The edit, of course. So with that, working backwards from post, thinking about post first, sometimes can help you craft a even better looking image. And of course, using set tools to kind of enhance what you have. For instance, we have this little light and a wand, and we kind of accentuate certain things on a car and kind of give these natural highlights, and then we can accentuate that in post. So, and then also, like I mentioned, post-production tools, such as the full Red Giant suite. We'll talk about the dynamic range of the cameras, using the color profiles correctly, and then also a footage showcase and a little bit of behind the scenes. So, cameras used on this, these pieces that I'm going to show you, I'm only showing you 2 full pieces. We shot a ton of footage, but you'll see some of the behind the scenes as well. So we use the Sony FX6, which is 4K camera, shoots up to 120 frames per second, and I think it does about 15 plus stops of dynamic range. And then the Canon C70 with the new update for Canon RAW, and that shoots about 16 stops of dynamic range, along with the Canon R5, which is a DSLR. So 2 cinematic cameras, sub $10,000, still in the affordable range. And a DSLR. And we'll talk about the difference in the color profiles using S-Log3 and Canon Log 2 and Canon Log 3. And we'll talk about pushing the exposure, doing some unconventional things, and basically just because you might blow out a shot doesn't make it terrible. There's some things that you can do on purpose. So, and of course, the lens filters, whether you're using physical lens filters or you just do them in camera, or meaning pop on, screw on, or through a matte box, or in post. And in post is where you actually have the most amount of flexibility, because it's basically baked in when you screw something on the front of your lens. So, we will talk through stylizing your footage and the difference between kind of traditional methods, and I like to do a little balance between traditional, meaning just basically color balance, and then adding a little spice to it with the Red Giant tools like Magic Bullet and Colorista. So we'll also show some of the new universe effects, and I won't be able to show all of the effects here right now. I'll show you a few, but on the back side of this booth here, there's a place where you can ask whatever questions, and I'm open to anything, and if I don't know the answer, I'm going to point at Chad or I'm going to point at Simon. So, let's just pop out of here, and let's just start with, so I will show you, and we're going to showcase some of these different looks, all right? And I have a timeline of basically all the different shots here stacked up, And I'm going to kind of build some of these with you so you can see how they work, and we're going to deconstruct some of those. But at the same time, I'm also going to, let me show you the full piece that's actually graded. And we have another colleague of ours who's not here right now named Max, and he has a show called Maxon Color. I'm a regular guest along with Chad and Simon and Diego, who's not here. But let me go ahead and I will play you a quick promo that we have. And here it is. All right. So here's our first one. Let me play this.
Not knowing what's gonna happen next. Chills. That feeling gives me chills. Reminds me of riding a roller coaster because it gives you the same feeling of butterflies when you're going super fast or riding a twisty. It's terrifying yet liberating. On a motorcycle, you could be going up and down and around curves like a roller coaster does. Being someone my size, at first it felt intimidating, but then being able to dominate such a big beast like that, it makes me feel like a tough badass. The sound of the engine is amazing. Most of my friends that I have met through riding motorcycles. It's an awesome community. It's a great feeling just to be on two wheels.
All right. So these, I have one more for you, but let me just kind of step through that and just give you an idea. So we shot a lot of stuff at night. We shot a lot of stuff with bright headlights just directly in the camera, kind of muddying up your shot, but it actually has a really interesting look to it. So there's a reason to capture that. And then also, RAW doesn't necessarily save you, but RAW will give you an interesting look as well. So if you're doing it with intention, you could actually pull back on some of that so it doesn't look so washed out. But let me see if I can pull some up. So here's one of those shots. So I'm going to break down a couple of these shots right here, and then I'll show you our next promo. So in here, what it started out with, let me go to my controls. Let's just open up Magic Bullet Looks. So inside of here, if I just reset, and let's just show you this look here real quick from scratch, right? So this is dialed in, right? And I can actually make this a preset. So I know for a fact that this was shot using this Canon C70, but this is actually a flattened ProRes 444. But it still will, there's a difference in the footage in the Sony and the Canon. So you can still grip your footage better and have a little bit better control if you know exactly what the recipe of that shot was. So I know for a fact that this was shot on the Canon, right? So let me go ahead and save this preset. And this is my Canon, and I spelled Canon correctly, right? Canon C70. And that's C log, or Canon log 2, right? Now there's a big difference between Canon log 2 and Canon log 3. Canon log 2 gives you an extended range, so you can have up to 16 plus stops, versus Canon log 3, which will crunch your image. So just because it says 3 doesn't mean it's the newest version, doesn't mean it's more advanced. So if you're looking for more range, C log 2 or Canon log 2. So I've saved this as a preset here, all right? And then let me just take this back, and I'm just gonna show you. This is how the image started out, right? So this is what we had, this like muddy looking image, and you don't really see too much of what's going on, but in the newer version here of Magic Bullet Looks, which was just released, you can see we have open color IO, and now if anybody does 3D, this also works in 3D too. This works in Cinema 4D, and you can use Magic Bullet in Cinema 4D. So in here, now you can utilize ACEs. You can jump in, and you can actually, let me change this color handling here, And this right here will allow me to do some really interesting things. So let me just dial this in first, and I'm gonna show you my recipe. So this right here, let's go with daylight, right? Already you can see a little bit of a difference immediately. And then look, I can dial in my exposure values here. So before it was really washed out and it was really just kind of, you have this wash across the screen, but now the footage is gripped a little bit better, and then I want to do my preview, not in sRGB, but in Rec 709, right? And then I can even go in here and let's grab a couple of tools. One of my favorite new tools that just came out was the optical diffusion, right? So this tool right here just kind of has that inverse, inverse square law fall off. So you have real natural light. So if you look right here, you can see this glow right here kind of just falls off naturally. It doesn't clip, and you don't just see high bright and then it just kind of cuts off. So you can actually see that it looks a little bit more natural in the environment that it's in. So if I go over here, I can actually add a couple more things. Let's see if I'll go, there's another one I'll do shadow highlight or even hue saturation. And I'm just dialing in one or two things, and then from there I can actually sort through all the preset looks. So if I go here, I'll drag this down, and here's my shadow, and then here's my highlights. And I can pump up the highlights, and if you look, I pumped up the highlights like a full stop, and they're still not clipping. You know, they're still kind of like blooming, and they still look beautiful. It's kind of has a nice vibe to it. It's not necessarily, let me bring this down just a hair. And if I brought it down, I could bring it all the way down -0 as well. So you have a lot more control. I typically like to go with like half down, but in this case, we want to blow them out. So we can use it also as a fill light, right? Fill light is just literally going to pump up only shadows, but I'm going to bring this back to, you can always reset by double clicking. Let me just bring this up. I'm going to pump up my highlights here to 1.0 like that. And then let's just go shopping here through the looks. All right, let me hit OK first. After I bring that back and then hit edit. And my looks are still not there. Lovely. It'll come around. So in the meantime, let me kind of skim through some that I already have prepared, and then I'll kind of do some compare and contrast here. So with this one right here, I'll just toggle it on and off. And you can see just how much punchier it is and how it kind of gives you this nice fall off whenever you add the highlights to it. So if I do this, turn this one off. And let me go to this one here. So on this one here, see if I can get my looks to cooperate. Okay, on this one I have a few things. There they are. So I knew that if I just closed it and opened it back up, now we have all that huge menu of presets that were all built by professionals, all right? So in here, these are like great starting points. Yes, you can literally just click a button and there you go, instant magic, but it's not really about that. It's about shopping through these, using these as a starting point, and then dialing them into the settings based on the footage that you already have. And now the fact that Ace's color is available inside of here, you can go and change your input, and you can dial in the exposure values, or you can change to, if this was shot with a different camera and you actually have that information, you can go in and you can dial that to the certain spec of the camera. And also, if you're lucky enough, I mean, I know in the editing world, you don't always have access to the raw camera footage. Sometimes you're just getting transcodes. So that's why the more you know, the better your footage can turn out. So in here, I've done a few things, and I can actually, let me just toggle this off so you can see. All right, so when we started out, this is just with adding, you know, making sure that I took it down a little bit, not even a half a stop, maybe a quarter stop, and I made sure that it was in Canon, all right? So this is the Canon, Canon Log 2, and that's in Cine Gamma Daylight, all right? And that's Log 2. And then over here, like I said, you can actually pump up that exposure. So this isn't a raw clip, but I can actually treat it like it was a raw clip. And if you look at it, it's keeping, even though I'm bringing this all the way down, all the exposure all the way down, you still see the sky, right? You still see the blue of the sky, and then you pump this all the way up, and you can still see all your shadows are kind of staying in place too. So this is a great little feature, and the color handling using Open Color I/O really helps standardize, and now this works hand in hand with so many other industry tools. So let me just bring this down a little bit so it's a little bit more comfortable, right? Like this, right? This is about where I had it before. I'm splitting hairs here trying to move this mouse. Okay, there it is. So if I were to turn this back on, right, now you can see I have a little bit of bloom. I also have halation turned on. That's a new effect by Red Giant and Magic Bullet Suite. So you can actually have that natural halation, the little subtle effects, and you're really going to notice them when you are dialed in this far in. And it's just a little icing on the cake. So that shadow highlights and optical diffusion. This is on the same engine that the optical glow effect in the VFX suite is on. So it has this really natural look to it, very organic versus just being pushing the colors to extreme values and then they just blow out and they don't look so pleasant. So it's really about keeping the image looking organic even though you still want to candy coat it, right? So this can get really stylized really quick. So let me just pop out of here. So in this promo we had a bunch of skies, and then we had some drone footage, right? And one great thing about that, and I'll show you that in a moment, is that even if, let's say you get GoPro footage, and GoPro footage doesn't have that much room for you to do any color grading on. When you're using Open Color I/O, using that engine inside of Magic Bullet, you can actually grip that sky and keep things intact and adjust the exposure values. I'll show you that in just a second. Let me show you this second promo here so you can get an idea of kind of like where the highs and the lows are inside of this. Let me show you here. All right.
Everybody's bike identifies who they are, and all the little things you could do, seeing what else is out there, and being comfortable, being uncomfortable is like a balance, because anything could happen. But overall, it's just an exhilarating feeling. Even though you're riding a group, at the same time you're an individual. When you see somebody on the side of the road on a bike, you stop, you wave. When you see somebody riding by, even if they're in a different type of bike, it's just like a rule of the road. You're a part of that environment when you're on a bike that you never would have known existed. It's a full spectrum. And it's beautiful.
Thank you. So, let's just break this one down a little bit, and I'll highlight and show you some BTS. So on these, we actually did some wanding on these, and this one I have some effects on already. Let me turn this off. So there's I have to do it the manual way because my shortcut is not in there, but so here we go. So that's what we started with, and we actually, there's a highlight that's right here on the outer edge of that speedometer, right? And we just use this little aperture light, kind of like these little LED lights, but instead of being a wand, it's actually just a little square. It's not bad, it's about $100, and you just put it on, it has a 1/4 screw on the bottom of it, so you can just use it and kind of wand in these ideas of what you want to do, and then later on you can use diffusion or you can use optical glow, and you can kind of pump these areas out so you can see all these little areas you want to highlight. You can see it. It's very, very subtle. So let me jump over here. This one right here in particular, we shot this pretty low light. Again, we're like shooting in almost complete darkness with just headlights, and then on the back of a pickup truck, and a lot of different things can happen. You know, in this one in particular, we wanted to kick up that dust right there. So you can see the dust over here. kicking up.
Oh,
And that only comes about if you knock down your light all the way. You want that exposure to go down all the way and kind of focus on what the light is hitting. So this right here was just kind of when I initially shot it. Let's see. Look kind of like this, really muddy, because also you're shooting directly into the headlight, right? So if I go into here, and I'll just show you some of the looks that I've already applied to it. And forgive me for the whole right-clicking thing. Again, I don't have my shortcuts on this machine, but let me right-click. And let me zoom in, too. That always helps. Make this a little bit taller. There it is. Okay, so right-click, enable, and this one here. So this one right here, we're just focusing on the headlights, and we're kind of just beaming the headlights and getting them to kind of have a nice little glow to them. And you don't see as much dust in this one, but then when you look at the other one, all right, let's go here. You can see on this one kicks up a little bit more dust, and this one has that texture because the lights are kind of, we kind of cranked up the exposure, and I did that in post. So, majority of the stuff that we shot, the Sony didn't shoot RAW, but the Canon shot RAW internally, so I was able to bring up anything on the RAW profile. But let's say, again, as the editor, sometimes you just get baked footage. You get stuff that's just flat, it's log, and then you have to kind of do the work yourself and guesstimate. So if you know, right, if you know the answer, then you can go in. Let me just add looks to this clip right here. And there it is. Look up bullet. There it is. Double click that. And I'll apply it to that clip by just double clicking it, highlighting that clip, and then I go edit look. All right, now we have the looks builder that pops up. And there's so many things in here. And if anybody wants a tour, I'll give you a tour on the back side after this is done. And then you can, like I said, you can start by just shopping around and just see what kind of gives you a good feeling for that clip in particular. Or, right, I like to go in and build it first, meaning I already know what the color profile is. So I go to this input right here, and this is actually set up to mirror the input and the output together. So a lot of the times, if you use older versions of Magic Bullet, you're going to see that when you change your input and then you go back into Premiere, you go back to your regular timeline, it looks like a completely different color. That's been fixed. But there's a couple hiccups that you should be aware of inside of Adobe Premiere, and I'll show you that. This also works really well in Resolve. Just in case anybody uses Resolve, this is like a nice little flavor packet that you can put in Resolve. So you can do it on the edit timeline, or you can do it on the color nodes on the color page. So do not be afraid to use this if you do use Resolve, okay? This is the secret sauce. And believe me, a lot of colorists use it. They just don't like to say out loud that they use this stuff. But it's amazing, so check this out. So I'm gonna go here. This one in particular was Canon, right? And I'm gonna go here, and I'll go to C-Log 2, daylight. And you can see already that we already kicked up some dust. You can see that. And then we can bring this down a little bit. And now you can see what's going on in here, right? This is just my starting point. Like, again, you can already start to mold your clip where you want to start before you even start to work on what the look is, right? So I go in here, and then I can start to shop around and see what works, right? Maybe I don't want something so eccentric. I just want to go with something like film looks, right? And then again, let's say, for instance, I like it, but it just looks a little too much. There's a potency slider right here for strength. So if I double click this, and I'm just going to say 80%, all right? Or you can even just kind of scrub the value to just see if that works for you. But I'll do like, typically I like to start at 80 and just see where that goes. And then that gives me kind of the same idea, just kind of draws it back a little bit so I don't have so much sheen and it's not so candy coated, all right? So I'll hit OK. Now the thing is, let's say I have two looks on here. That's why you're getting that. So let me disable this look right here. So now that's where we are. And like I said before, an issue that has happened in the past with color management, right, is that you didn't have full control like you do right now. So in here, now I can actually, what you're seeing right here, and I click OK, that's what you're going to end up with on your timeline. Okay, so that's a huge improvement, and using Open Color I/O is something that standardizes across the board. So if we were to go, let's say for instance, you're just starting from scratch, all right? And when you get into your timeline, let me just show you two things to be aware of under the preferences, under general. These two right here they work to your benefit in some cases, but in this case, they do not work to your benefit. So like display color management and extended range monitoring don't necessarily work in your favor. Let's say you're working in standard range, not HDR, all right? So turn these off so then that way it doesn't look completely oversaturated, or if you go to drop a clip in, all right? So pay attention to here, preferences, general, display color management, and extended dynamic range monitoring. I turn those off, all right? Then go into your sequence settings, and then just make sure, all right? Let me just click inside of here first. Sequence settings, that's another thing. You need to click on the actual timeline, then go to sequence settings, all right? So go from there, and then go look here, and you'll see, where are we? Color profile. There it is, working color space. So sometimes, depending on what clip it is that you put in first, the metadata might point to the wrong color space. Here's one place to fix it. Under the sequence settings, and then look for working color space and change it to 709. Once you do that, I will point it out a few other times that, like I have some here. Let me just go to this one immediately so you can see, and then we'll talk through this BTS right here. So in the meantime, when you drop a clip in, if it looks like this off the bat, it's hugging onto the metadata from the camera. And it's immediately saying, this is S-Log3. And that's just kind of like a safety. So it's assuming that you want to work with that LUT off the bat. But instead, what you might want to do, right? So let me turn these off, and I'm going to go here, right-click, reveal in project, and then from there, all right, I'm going to go to this clip. Even it looks normal in the thumbnail, if you notice, like let me just double click it. So this is something to know. And when I'm looking at it in the source, it looks fine, but as soon as it goes over into my timeline, it'll look like this, all right? So that's just a safety done by Adobe to kind of keep things in context. If you shot with a specific LUT and that's in the metadata of the file, that's what you're gonna have immediately. So to avoid having that happen, or if that does happen, you could do this to batches of clips. But if you see this problem in the timeline and things are blown out automatically, just right click, and then we'll go down here, and you're gonna see there's an option for, modify, interpret footage. And then in here, see how it says, use media color space from file, all right? And it's already set to S-Log. Go over here and change that, and this is right here, color space override, and just change that to 709, or whichever color space you're working in, and you're gonna watch, as soon as I hit OK, it's going to start to look more like that. And this is something by default that happens. So be aware of that, and especially if you start to use any of these effects and you're just wondering why is everything so crunched? Why is everything so saturated? That's the number one reason why. So there's like 3 places where this will get in your way. It's a safety thing, but it's kind of like the child lock in the back seat if you're an adult trying to get up. You know, so like think about it like it's there to help you, but it's also kind of understand where you unwind it, okay? So those are 3 different ways to turn off any metadata that enables a LUT or enables a color space. So let me just show you, let's take a moment here, and I'm just gonna kind of showcase some of our behind the scenes of those last 2 clips, kind of how we shot it, and then I'll tell you a couple of things and that have to do with the way that it was shot or the reason it was shot. Like right here, you can just kind of see this is all like shot in the back of a pickup truck from like early evening into the night. And we kind of were just aiming to shoot the flares and aiming to shoot the headlights and kind of blind ourselves and just sit there and freeze on the back of a pickup truck. But it's all in good fun. So this is the finished product, the raw, what we got afterward. And you can actually see right over here, that's from the highlight, from the reflection of the pickup truck right here. And again, this is kind of like what we ended up with stuff like looking like this. And that has an embedded LUT on it too. So again, same thing, embedded LUT. So I'm just gonna kind of skip through this. And one thing that's important, especially whenever you're doing this stuff, if one thing doesn't work, try, and I will jump up and I'll get 3 different angles of the same thing, as long as I buy myself enough time and make sure to buy people dinner afterward, then I know that I can pull these things off. But, we got the gimbal shot, then we have the shot with the Sony, and then we have the other camera going at the same time, doing it tight, and then this one right here is just on the back of the truck for some leverage. Then we had our little RGB setup here. Those are with the aperture lights. And again, I'll spare you the whole going through and unwinding those LUTs, but so this was our interview setup with the red, the green, and the blue, like the video channels. And then this is kind of some other part of this whole thing that we have not used yet. We're doing another whole piece on just the automotive paint, the texture, and that's going to turn into a Maxon session. So this right here is kind of, we ended up shooting initially just kind of black paint with the lights on, and here's the Sony camera. We're using a lot of Sigma lenses with the Sony camera, and then Canon lenses with the Canon cameras. Always shoot Canon lenses with the Canon cameras, and I tend to like using the Sigma lenses with my Sony. So this is the kind of stuff we ended up doing after we turned the lights off. Then we just threw a light on that dust that was coming off when it was sanding down these pieces of this fender that we were going to paint. We ended up getting up these things that kind of look like particles. It almost looks like trap code. So all this right here is because it didn't work in the light. Shut off the lights, then change our lighting setup, and then pop on a different lens, and this is what it kind of looked like. And this right here is when he actually was blasting it with this purple here. And then on this end, this is our RGB hood. We were still trying to keep with the color channel tradition we had going on here, and he painted a little fire on it. And we had several different, so we had 2 rooms going with different painting setups. You can see Chad here, and Chad was jumping in, and Chad was just kind of checking the monitors, and we would go back and forth and try the shot. The shot doesn't work. Let's try this. Let's move this. Let's change angles. Let's put a light on it. Let's turn the lights on. Let's turn them off. Building enough time. The most important thing is that we actually went out and did a scout and a practice shoot. And we took the footage home, and then we tried it out, and we saw what things looked like before we shot every single thing. So this right here is day 1, but we had a pre-shoot day, and the pre-shoot day is when we actually got some really interesting gems. And you can see Chad right here kind of looking at the balls here in the chart and just saying, what is this? And the whole point of this is kind of to measure your light and kind of this is basically so you can do this in Cinema 4D down the line. I'm not going to speak on that because that's not my realm, but we shot everything right here so we can integrate elements into our scenes later on. And then right here we have some paint. We are shooting some textures with a macro. And we just kind of went to Home Depot, went to Target, ruined a bunch of cooking supplies, some Pyrex. We got some interesting things like this. Keep in mind, these are still flat, and they still have this much color in them. So once you actually, I can put some magic bullet looks on there, and you'll see. And this also just kind of wanding it down with the light. And then we mix all the paint together. So, there's also, and we definitely had some drone stuff in there. So EJ, who's around here somewhere, was filming, and I kind of felt like I was standing next to somebody that was in a whole different world. He was in the metaverse, and he was controlling this FPV drone. He got some really interesting shots. And actually, the tail end shot came from this FPV here. and that thing just flies. And then it flies, and then it crashes. But luckily, we have our daredevil here who's sitting around here, Sammy, and he ran to pick it up, looks into it and says, "I got you, bro," and then runs it back to us. We swapped out the ND on the front of the GoPro and then continued shooting. So over here, we were shooting, initially it was just with overhead light and then black paint so we can have some contrast so we can see some texture. And we tried that for a little bit and it looked okay. But then we flipped to colored lights and the same contrast. And this is kind of what it looked like. This is the other angle where it's kind of cheating, right? This is just our behind the scenes camera. And then again, without color, it started looking like this. So it's actually, that purple is just from a colorful light. So we're kind of just, we're mixing the two, right? Using something practical and then using something in the software. And then from there, we can end up with some pretty interesting looks. And here's another thing we did. We hung some plexiglass, went to the hardware store, even bought some glass that broke in our hands. Somebody got cut by that glass. And kind of use it as a transitional element, right? So we have right here, right? And we ran this back twice. We did it once with the overhead lights, and it's in slow-mo too, so bear with me. Right, fills the screen, you get the idea. Same thing in the dark, fills the screen, and that just kind of gives you another idea of what we were doing. So we tried a few artistic ideas, some practical things, some practical in-camera effects, and a lot of them were just kind of like, you know what, that doesn't work, let's try that. We've got a couple of shots of this, not happy, let's do this. And half of the things that we did was just trying it, attempting it, and if it fails, so what? We could probably do something with it in post. You never know. So, but besides that, let's just go back here. Let's just kind of revisit this. So, as far as, let me just take it back to here. Like I mentioned before, the cameras nowadays, the range, you can go up to 16 stops of dynamic range, even more, I'm sure. But with something that's sub $10,000, a nice cinematic camera like the FX6 or the Canon C70, a lot of them have internal RAW now, and you can shoot on SD cards versus buying a ton of super fast drives, right? So, the tools have gotten a lot more affordable. I used to shoot, if anybody's familiar with the Canon XL2, that's what I started shooting with. I still have that camera to this day. It's a tank. And now we make filters to look like that camera. So, but besides that, the post tools have enhanced the way that you work with your footage on the timeline. You don't have to transcode everything. You can work with the RAW right on the timeline. You can utilize your RAW profile and then come in and use Open Color I/O inside of Magic Bullet, and you can adjust the exposure values even on a flattened video. So if they give you enough range in that flattened log video that you have, you'll be able to capture the sky and keep everything intact, and it'll still look pretty decent. Just like you would, not exactly like if you had a RAW clip, but pretty close. So that's a huge improvement. And also the lens filters, there's so many effects that are built in that we can use as far as lens filters, the optical diffusion. There's a ton of lens filters built into there, like the Tiffin filters, right? The Black Pro Mist, all this kind of stuff is kind of built into the effect. So you don't have to screw it on to your camera anymore, meaning it's not baked into your footage. So you can work with a nice flattened file that's gonna do a lot of work for you in post. So sometimes, I'm a fan of shooting under and shooting over for the instance that you get stuff looking like this, okay? In order to get this kind of stuff, you shoot under and then you push the highlights up higher. Or if you want to blow things out and kind of wash it out and give it this really interesting look, you shoot higher. So you don't always have to stay within the exposure values that they suggest for you to stay in. You can actually pump them up and give yourself a real stylized version. But again, stylize, all right? If you add too much salt to your dish, it becomes salty. So just a pinch, okay? Right here, I'm kind of just pumping it and pushing it just to show you how much we can work with. So in the Red Giant atmosphere, right, in the Red Giant family, there's also a really nice and interesting lens flare tool, works inside of After Effects. And basically you can design your own flare, and you can put a flare just off screen. So if you did decide to do something that looked like you shot with a cinematic camera, if you point a cinematic lens, and you point it right at the sun, you're gonna get this beautiful flares. But if you shot it with the $200 lens that you got as a kit lens, and you point it up there, now you can use this effect to kind of give you that look as though you did have that cinematic lens. So I can show that. Again, I will be on the back side of this booth, and I can show you how to build some of these things so you can add some texture to your video as well. Besides that, the optical diffusion is pretty amazing, and it just gives you this real, natural, organic look. And halation, of course, kind of giving you the film look and giving you those really, really subtle glows on the exterior of your highlights. And of course, ACE's color management inside of Magic Bullet Looks is huge because, like I said, you could be working with a flattened file. Maybe you just ripped down a promo and you have to repurpose it, because this kind of stuff happens in real life broadcast. And maybe you just need to do color on some drone shot that was used in a promo already, which does happen. You could flatten that out and you can add color back to it after already desaturating it and adjusting the exposure. Pretty awesome stuff. So with that said, I would say that will leave us open to questions, and I will showcase some of these effects and filters on the back side of this booth here, and I will gladly dig into all the settings. I hope this was an eye-opener for some of you, and I hope you enjoy the new filters and effects. Thank you.
Awesome.
All right,
Thank
I think
you
I'm at
thank
42.
you, sir. Yeah, look at you. Check. Hello. There I am. I'm back. All right, folks. Once again, live questions first. We do have a couple online, but you have priority because you sat here, you got the knowledge firsthand, you get the firsthand questions from the audience. So that's the thing about these, like the presentation. You guys have been doing such a bang-up job on presentations. Everybody's just like, nope, I got it. It was clear, done.
Well,
Ship
also,
it.
you can ask me over here. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
I don't bite. Don't be shy. Ask me any question. No dumb questions. You want me to do something in Universe or Magic Bullet or even using Colorista, any of that, let me know.
Yeah, so he'll be back there with footage and you can check it out. But we did have a couple questions from the interwebs. Hello, interwebs. Questions. First question is, what did you use on the C70? What lens did you use on the C70?
Canon.
It was a
So
Canon lens.
The Canon, in particularly, those are the new RF lenses. So I want to say it's a RF 50 prime,
Okay.
and we had a 2470 and a 50 prime.
Okay. And someone was wondering about Nuke. That's a good question. The plugins for Nuke.
As far as these go, I want to say they go across the full ecosystem. I'm not 100%. So
Not 100%.
Yeah, I'm not in the Nuke realm.
I think I'm gonna have to talk to Simon on that.
Yes.
So until then, Anthony will be in back. Let's give him another big round of applause and stay tuned because we'll be back right after this with our very own Ellie Wade.
All right. Thank you.